Hello, beautiful people. Today in the studio, we're going to work on creating a stylized metallic K. It's hard to tell from these pictures because they kind of look brown. So there's a picture of me trying to show you what the metallics look like. And another example of not adding the metallics, there's a letter B. So let's just talk about the supplies we're going to need. Basically, it's a marker, an alcohol ink marker. You need some 91% alcohol. I use the needle nose tip bottle because it makes it easier to dispense. You need some metallic solution, metallic alcohol ink. I use the Piñata brand, Jacquard Piñata Brass. And you need the dryer. And I'm working on Kirkland photo paper, the back of it, not the shiny glossy side, but the back of the paper. And basically you just draw out your letter. It's very simple. Then you use your 91% alcohol. You add a squirt or several drops of alcohol to the alcohol ink letter that you've drawn. And then you take your dryer and you go around in circles and you just jump from side to side trying to dry that alcohol ink into a wispy type pattern while still pushing the majority of the ink back into a straight line or a curved line depending on what letter you're trying to accomplish. Here I've just pushed it back into a straight line so that I can define my K. But as you can see, the wispy alcohol ink goes out to the sides and I just jump back and forth trying to kind of corral it or contain it and push it back to that main straight line of the letter K. We're just going back and forth and pushing that ink back up to make that main trunk of the letter. I guess it's a trunk. That's what we're going to call it at least. So we just keep adding alcohol ink and swirling it around on our paper. It's okay. Let it go ahead and flow where it wants to flow. Just grab it with the dryer and push it back to making that strong trunk of the letter. See, there's that word again. But you just want to have a more defined letter shape. It's good to have the wispies coming out from the letter, but make sure that your letter has a defined shape so that people can tell what letter you're actually trying to accomplish. There I got a little wild with the wispy, so I just take some alcohol and my dryer and push it back towards the letter K. And you can see my wispy lines that I've achieved while still seeing that the majority of the ink is on the trunk of that letter. And that's really all there is to it. It's really that simple. It's not simple to do this because the alcohol has a mind of its own, but you really just want to keep corralling the ink and going from side to side. I learned that trick from Lori of Lori Brewer's channel, and if you haven't seen her before, just like I do in my other alcohol ink videos, I strongly encourage you to hop over and check out her channel. She is absolutely phenomenal when it comes to alcohol inks. I love watching her create. She does such an amazing job. She's the one that really inspired me into getting into alcohol ink to begin with. So I just keep adding some alcohol. I don't like the harsh lines that develop or that can develop. So every time I get a real harsh line, I just add a few more drops of alcohol, the 91% isopropyl alcohol, and blow it around. You just keep blowing it until you wind up with a pleasing pattern. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It just takes a lot of practice. So just keep blowing it here and there and everywhere. Try not to blow it everywhere. Just contain it to here and there, while still defining that straight line of your letter. Now, if you were doing a C or an S, obviously it wouldn't be a straight line. You would want to keep defining the curvature of the letter. But for the letter K, it's all straight lines, so that's all I'm going to do is blow the ink so that I get the wispy effect and then blow it back on top of itself so that it creates the main trunk of the letter. I don't know where I came up with the word trunk from. I've never heard that before, but there you have it. You never know what you're going to get when you come to the Awkward Queens channel, right? You never know what I'm going to say. I never know what I'm gonna say, which makes doing these voiceovers really quite interesting sometimes. Now, you'll get some staining on your paper depending on the alcohol ink that you use, the alcohol marker. It will stain your paper a little bit, at least this pink one did. So you have kind of a head start and can kind of tell where you need to blow your ink back to. If your alcohol ink marker doesn't stain your paper, it's a little more difficult to know where your original lines were. But you just want to keep pushing the alcohol back to your original line and just keep the ink moving. That's really the main key to this. Every time it starts to get dry, you add a little more alcohol and swirl it around. No, I'm not this fast in real life. In fact, I think this took me probably about 35 or 40 minutes to complete this K by the time I was all said and done. I have sped this video up so you're seeing it in double time. So it really doesn't go quite this fast. Even though when you're first learning how to move the alcohol ink around like I am, it feels like the ink is moving this fast sometimes. It can be really hard to keep up with the ink. But just take your time and remember that mistakes can be corrected by adding more isopropyl alcohol over the top of the mistake and blowing the ink back onto itself or back to where you want it, and just work side to side. That's really the key to this whole process. You just wet the ink with your 91% alcohol, whether you're using fluid alcohol ink or an alcohol ink marker. You just wet it with your 91% isopropyl alcohol, take your dryer and blow it around, and try to maintain some sort of a line in the middle, especially if you're not doing a freeform design. If you're doing a design like this letter or like the spiral I did in the last video that I did. So you just want to keep blowing that ink back around so that it kind of blows back on top of itself to define the shape that you're doing, while still getting some wispy accents along the sides of the letter. I will keep doing this until I get a shape that I like, and I will tell you that the shape of this K winds up being a little more stylized than I originally set out to create. I just set out to create a typical letter K, which you could see from my original drawing. But the alcohol ink had a mind of its own once I started adding the metallic. And when I do an alcohol ink painting with the marker, I have to add the metallic as a separate step. And for me, that I'm not quite good enough. For me, that's really difficult, because then I'm trying to contend with an alcohol ink pattern that I've already laid down that I like with the Wispies, and adding a new layer of alcohol being the metallic, and trying to keep my original Wispies that I like while still adding that metallic in. And it gets a little bit crazy for me trying to do that. I'm sure with more practice it will get easier, but I just find it easier to lay down the metallic when I'm using the fluid alcohol ink to begin with. That may not be an issue for you, especially if you've been doing this for a longer time period, but because I'm still new to this process, it gets difficult for me. So that's why we wind up with a more stylized letter at the end, when the original K was just a block letter K. So I will continue blowing the ink out until we get to the metallic part. The reason I seem to be going back over this letter, even though it appeared to be finished, is because I just found some spots that I wasn't real happy with. And that's the great thing about alcohol inks, is that even though your piece may be done, you may look back over it and think, oh, I want to change this, or I think that this part could be better. And you can always go back and re-wet it with the alcohol and change the shape of it. So that's what I'm doing here. My letter K is complete. It has the wispy variations, but I just felt like there were a few spots that I kind of wanted to tweak and do a little differently, so that's what I'm doing here. I hope the audio on this video winds up being a lot better than the audio was on previous videos that I've done. I'm going to try something different with stopping the music every time I talk, and hopefully that will make it easier to understand and hear what I'm saying. I hope. But I also just wanted to mention that I still haven't found a great angle for the camera while I'm doing this. It seems like if I put the camera over top, then all you can see is the heat tool, or not the heat tool, but the air tool moving around. And if I put it to the side, then it distorts what the piece looks like. So please bear with me while I try to figure out what the best angle is to video these types of videos, because it's not as easy to figure out as you might think it is. So here we're beginning with the metallic. And unfortunately, my bottle of metallics got a little blocked by some of the mica particles that are what make up the metallic look. So I accidentally added a little more metallic than I meant to in several spots on this K. And I really wound up not being thrilled with the outcome, but I wanted to give you an idea of what's possible and hopefully give you an example of how to do this. Or maybe you're watching this and thinking this is a great tutorial of how not to do things. That's entirely possible as well. But I wanted to try to give you an idea of how to do a letter like this and how to blow the metallics around on top of the alcohol ink marker, because it is a little bit different than when you're using fluid alcohol inks. When you're trying to add metallics to alcohol ink marker work, you wind up with a little different experience than you do if it's all fluid alcohol inks. So every time I wind up with kind of a blotch of metallics, I just add a little more of my isopropyl alcohol on top of the little blob and kind of blow that out. And I found that it works better if you try to catch it before the blob of metallics has completely dried. I just think it winds up flowing a little bit easier and it winds up giving you a little better look. So you just add 1 drop is all it takes into a little pool of the isopropyl alcohol and hope that it doesn't all blow apart like it did for me just a second ago. But you just add 1 drop and then you keep using your isopropyl alcohol to continue blowing the metallics out. You don't want to add another drop of metallics every time you add some more isopropyl, because you'll wind up with just one great big metallic mess and you'll wind up with the blobs all over your piece, and that's not the look I was going for. So I add a little puddle of my isopropyl and then I add 1 drop. I intentionally add 1 drop. A lot of times on this piece, because of some mica blocking the little needle nose applicator, I wound up with 2 or 3 drops of metallic, and that was way more than I needed for this piece. So I spent a lot of time trying to blow out that metallic while not blowing out the rest of the work that I had done with the alcohol ink marker. But you just keep blowing it around similarly to what you did beforehand, just blowing out the K with the pink. And remember, when you get those unsightly blobs, if that's not what you want, add a little alcohol before the blobs dry. You can do it after the blobs dry, but they tend to get a little more stuck to your paper, so it's a little bit harder to move. And remember, I'm doing this on the back of the Kirkland photo paper, So you may get a different result if you try to use UPO. I haven't done this on UPO yet. I will probably play with that technique this afternoon, maybe tomorrow. So if there's a lot of things that are different, I'll make another video to show you the differences. But if you can catch the alcohol metallics before they dry, they're easier to blow out than after they dry to the paper. So I'm just trying to move it around, make sure that I don't wind up with one blob of metallics. And you can see some of my pink is still moving even though my metallics have kind of settled down. So now I'm trying to fix the pink and get it back to the main block shape of the letter. You can see this next little piece that's giving me problems. It's kind of poking out from the arm of the K, and I'm trying to fix it. My problem is that the pink ink moved up along with the metallic, and trying to fix that before the metallic dries was difficult. So I just keep adding the 91% isopropyl alcohol, and I let it sit for just a second and then keep blowing it around. And with more alcohol and some patience, I finally get that moved. Now it stained my paper a little bit, but I think that that's okay. I think that it adds to the character. It adds character to your character. That was pretty funny, but it does add some character to your character. Now, the part that I just added, I accidentally dropped, I think it was 3 drops in that corner when I only meant to add 1 drop. So you can see that I'm left with a lot of metallic ink down on that lower part of the trunk of the letter. So I just keep blowing it around as much as I can, adding a little bit of alcohol, blowing that around, and I'm trying to catch it before it dries. There you can see the alcohol ink had a mind of its own, so the pink jumped out all the way over to the side of the paper. I just added some alcohol and cleaned that up the best I could. It's difficult when the original ink you laid down starts to grow these little legs, and you're trying to corral the little legs to get them all back to behaving and facing in one direction. But all you can do is add some isopropyl and keep working it. Doing these wispy paintings is as much about patience as it is knowing when to add ink and when to add more alcohol. So as long as you have patience with yourself and with the process, knowing that alcohol ink really does have a mind of its own, you're just trying to corral it into where you'd like for it to go, realizing that you're never going to get it absolutely perfect because that's not the nature of this technique. But as long as you can control it and figure out when you want to add, like I said, more ink or more isopropyl, you get a better feeling for it with each painting you do. But it really is as much about having patience with yourself in the process as it is about anything else. Because the ink will blow out, it will get away from you, it will get wild, it will kind of do what it wants to do sometimes, and there's not a whole lot you can do to control that. You just have to kind of go with the flow, and when it blows out or when it goes in places that you don't want it to be, you just add some more isopropyl and take your dryer and keep blowing it back to where you want it. That's really all you can do. So you can see that that second drop of metallics up at the top of the trunk of the letter really added a lot of metallics to this. And I really wound up with a lot more metallic than I wanted originally, because my needle nose bottle was plugged up with some little mica pieces. But it wound up okay. It wound up still looking like a K in the end. Just be patient with yourself in the process. I'm just glad y'all found my video and decided to stick around and watch. That just tickles me to pieces. I hope that all of you lovely creatives have a magnificent day, and I hope that you have a great week that's full of creativity and lots of different creative adventures. I hope that you try this Wispy alcohol ink technique. It's a lot of fun to do. Just remember to have patience with yourself and the process. It's not going to turn out exactly perfect. At least that's been my experience. I'm still very new to this process, but it surprises me how things turn out. But I think that's part of the beauty of doing the Wispy alcohol ink paintings. I wish that I had gotten a better picture, because a lot of this metallic wound up looking muddy in the pictures that I did get of this K when it was finished. But it really does have a nice metallic look to it, and there are parts where there's more metallics than there are in some other spots, and I like the variation. It gives your eye a place to rest as it goes around the piece, and I really like how that wound up turning out. I just wish that I could show you guys better how it's more metallic and shiny rather than looking kind of muddy, which is what it kind of looked like in the beginning picture, and even kind of how it looks now. But I appreciate you watching. I hope that you like and subscribe. I really hope that you liked this video and that you click that little thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please, please, please do. We have a lot of fun on my awkward channel. I hope you enjoyed my video. And again, I hope you have a great creative week.